We believe we found it. Sending over the location and the rendezvous coordinates for debrief. A message blinks to Chognok's console. Knowing the princess has already seen it, he wastes no time lining the ship up to FDL. Chuck pulls up the full report as soon as it comes into her feed. Her lower arms twitch and legs shake slightly. Catching herself, she sits down on the side of Simone's bed. Finally, after weeks and weeks of searching for anything, this may very well be the big break. The caddy reaches over and grabs a pillow. She pulls it in close, embracing it with all four of her limbs. The scent of her stolen Terran still predominantly permeates from it. Closing her glimmering eyes, her memory sinks in. Back on Kamoy, Simone made a scene by giving loud declarations. At first it was confusing and scary in the way she seemed rather threatening. However, her feelings all shifted when it became clear that the Terran was making a gesture of genuine assurance. Although there was plenty of performative Terran-grade sarcasm in her words, Chuck never felt more genuine comfort in her life. For the first time in this horrible situation that she was in, she believed everything was going to be okay. That was the moment when Chuck felt her hearts sing. And ever since, Simone made them sing louder and louder until her physical words carried the expression. This is love. Real love. Chuck breathes in deeply, pressing her face in the pillow. She is so scared. Not only for the very possible violent conflict required to get Simone back, but also the growing possibility of Simone no longer being... No. She's alive. She's alive. And fighting. She's too strong. She's alive. She has to be. Chuck frantically reassures herself. But that reassurance is soon replaced by a deep-seated guilt. Simone wouldn't even be there if it wasn't for her. She should have tried harder to convince Simone not to leave the ship, or followed her immediately when the shuttle returned, or something. The cycling dread and worries, neglect to be remedied by any self-made reassurance. Nothing outside of the conclusion can bring true peace, but the solace of this progress is a bittersweet light in this void of uncertainty. Exiting FDL, Chocolate notifies the entire crew. Soon the Kelly siblings meet up in the bridge with the captain. Without saying a word between them, a holographic map pulls up, revealing a small armada, although perhaps flotilla is a more apt title, all waiting in a staggered, armed and battle-ready line for this final vessel to arrive. Immediately, a direct communication line is established to the largest battleship. To Quib Chap, this is a Melochuk. We request King Robert Latamortaz to be present. Akali's voice asserts. I am present, Brom assures. Ease, kin. This is to be a diplomatic matter. To this, Chocono notices, in his readings, that all of the trained weapons pointed at the Quib Chap powered down to standby, lifting the tension significantly, if for a time. Yes, Your Majesty. Shall we send a transport shuttle for an in-person debrief? By your order, we have collected pertinent intel, some of which is concerning, the voice informs. Brom looks to his sister before pondering something in great consideration. We will link shuttles between the ships. This is to be a council meeting, he says, looking right back at the hologram of his flagship. A moment passes by before a response comes back. A few members of the council wish to know if this is regarding the princess. Indeed. I believe we may have a beneficial alliance to consider, Brom confirms. I'll give details in the meeting. Yes, Your Majesty. A shuttle with the council aboard will meet at the midpoint in 30 standard minutes. Understood. May the moons protect you, Brom replies before giving Chuck a nod. I'll wait in the shuttle. I recommend you bring the drone to security, he says before making his leave. Chuck scratches the side of her face in consideration of her next move. Would you like for me to come along as well? Chuck offers in absolute loyalty. Oh no, I need you at the helm of this ship if anything unfortunate were to occur, the princess replies with a thankful pat on the captain's shoulder. I'll keep the comms open to you. If you require aid, I will act. This is a superbly dangerous situation. Thank you, Chucknock, but to be honest, Chuck trails off as she turns to prepare. I was vastly more frightened when I walked into a Terran bar. Brom shifts uncomfortably as the shuttles meet, and begin locking together. He then glances at his sister in concern. I thought you would wear your formal attire for such a gathering, or at the very least bring that awoken, he says wearily. Chuck remains steadfast, fully clad in her power armor. She waits for the shuttle doors to open, her posture well-trained and firm. Seven is untested when it comes to performing security duties, so if I'm to be here alone, I'll take the necessary precautions. Be thankful I'm not armed, considering who I'm dealing with, she responds, already utilising her dealing with politicians tone of voice. You might as well be. You're comparable to a Deathworlder with that on. Even if the council was wearing our best gear, yours looks quite a bit more capable. Exactly. The doors then unseal and open up to a fairly larger vessel interior. Where Chuck's shuttle is a simple atmosphere-capable transport, Brahms is a true military troop and vehicle lander. Except where a single landcraft would sit is a makeshift table where 4 individuals sit, 3 females and a single male. A far cry from the Grand Council that convenes in the homeworld, though that is what Chuck expected. She can only fully recognise 2 of the individuals present, and only one of them as an official council member from before the coup. Chuck does her best to not tense up as she focuses on 2 soldiers in repainted Royal Guard armour standing up against the wall behind the table. Newly branded or not, seeing that armour is unnerving. Seeing their grips tighter on their pulse rifles makes Chuck ever more sure that suiting up was the correct action to take. It is wonderful to see you return to us unharmed, King Bromalata Mortaz. The eldest of the council speaks up, giving Brom a deep bow, before eyeing the princess sternly. Chakalata Mortaz, she addresses plainly. Councilmember Jul Mortaz, I do truly hope your sons are safe in these unprecedented times. They probably served in the military, if I recall. Chuck returned in the same cadence. Junamas's faded red fur twitches as she keeps unfavourable words from bubbling up. They were executed when I fled, and helped shape the tears of Selanu. Is all she says instead, words laced with bitterness. My condolences. May the moons cradle them closely. Chuck nods, before addressing the next individual, a much younger female of whom she recognises to a lesser extent. She is taller and lankier than the average female. Her light brown fur gives her sharp facial features prominence and noticeability. Theratuma, Chuck addresses, as the name comes to mind. If I recall, you were Thalotaz's assistant. Theratuma gives the princess a respectful bounce. Indeed. Madame Thalotas peacefully stepped down from the council. I, however, refuse to comply with the orders of a tyrant, especially after hearing what came of the royal family. Although your role in it is uncertain to me, I admit I've always had doubts on your direct involvement. I'm relieved to see at least some of those doubts justified, she says, giving those next to her a slightly smug demeanour. Chuck then looks to the male. Forgive me, but I've run out of recognised faces. Who may you be? She asks. The male returns a short nod, his shortened pink fur barely wavering. Colonel Natas, top of my class in military stratagem, and an old friend of Brom. Both feats granted me this position as temporary councillor, he replies in a youthful, yet undoubtedly experienced voice. And I am Nordstrom, former governor of the Miniana colony. After being ousted and replaced by a clad hooflicker I didn't hesitate to enlist. I suppose my experience with keeping the peace earned me this spot? The final member spoke up, completely breaking standard decorum. Finding this rather refreshing, Chuck examines the individual. This woman was shorter than even most males of their species, but the beads, markings, and other dazzling additions of body art really make her stand out. She almost reminds Chuck of an ancient oracle or shaman from their people's past, especially seeing that her horns are long and unmanaged. A true statement of a free spirit. A pleasure to meet you both, the princess addresses. Shall we officially begin? The 4 looked at Brom with various expressions of expectation and cautious curiosity. Certainly. Cal, what have your scouting teams found? The prince kicks off. Cal Natas nods before flicking at his lens, linking to all present to share footage. We haven't been able to get extensive intel on the planet itself. As far as we can tell, it's an uncharted continental death world. If the Terran is to be believed, it shows a very similar size and conditions of Earth, when it was still a habitable planet. We suspect that's why this Terran terrorist group has an entire station orbiting it. Chuck watches the footage of a distant station of concerning quality and size, although it doesn't compare to most other cross-species inhabitation installations. The fact that something this established out in the middle of nowhere breeds greater perturbation. This, without a doubt, shows that this group is far more formidable than previously considered. They must have funds, resources, and sheer manpower to accomplish this. So they take their initiatives to this station, she asks. Uncertain. However, we have observed them making many shuttle runs with stealth ships, mostly where there is significant disruptive weather activity. We are unsure as to the purpose of those runs are, but it may very well involve their indoctrination techniques. Also, we have yet to confirm, but this planet may have native inhabitants. Unless there is another reason as to why the children of Gaia haven't yet attempted any sort of colonization yet, And to add to the complicated nature of all this, Carl trails off, skipping the footage ahead until a ship jumping out of FTR emerges into view. Although Chuck is no expert by any means when it comes to vessels, she can easily recognize the Terran ship. The Terran Union military ship, to be precise. There was no official marking or symbol of the Terran Union itself, but nowhere else would you find this particular class of Terran engineering. The ship is modest in size, and has no significant visible armament. However, it is coated in extraordinarily thick armor plating, while moving at such nimble speeds, indicating that whoever was on that ship required protection at high costs. It may not have markings, but it's only a ship for the shipyards of the Terran Highworld Titan. It is either transporting a Terran Union official, or someone that has immense connections and can afford to purchase such a ship from the Terran military. Carl confirms Chuck's thoughts. Bron leans forward on the table, grievous of the potential. If the Terran Union is in some capacity backing the Children of Gaia, this could be an incredible blow to galactic relations for the Terrans. Considering what these terrorists have done, if this were to ever get out, being exiled from Central Galactic may be the least of the Terran Union's problems, he says, giving his sister a glance. Horrified, Chuck attempts to scratch the side of her helmeted head with her lowered limbs. The Terran Union in their current state isn't able to be self-reliant. Without their trade networks, it would only be a matter of time before they would collapse as a nation. Then their enemies can come in, and very possibly end them as a people, she agrees. And so risk the universe of another destructive Deathworlder species. How does this concern our plight? Jorna Mas dismisses harshly. Through the helmet's visor, Chuck's eyes blast in brilliant red. She stares at the Asian Callie in well-practiced authority. Because you will not receive the agreed-upon funds if I don't see the results I was promised, Counselor, she notifies darkly. Regardless of how this woman recognized her status, she is to be reminded of who Chocolate Motaz is. Not even 2 months ago we considered you an enemy of the people, and I have yet to be convinced otherwise. Do not forget what company you are currently at mercy to, or that bounty on your head. Junamas snaps back, unshaken from the display. Oh, Counselor, if I was an enemy to the people, then bounty or no, it would be your head you should be concerned with, Chuck counters, popping her helmet free to prove her own dismissal of this old woman's threats. Then, to the growing concern of the back guards, Chuck slowly begins to maneuver herself around the table to face her more openly. Brom intends to say something, but this intense behaviour from his little sister makes him hesitate. This can very well be a perfect test of her loyalties. To question my loyalty to my people is the greatest insult you can bestow upon me. My family and my entire line have been at the forefront of the people as their guardians for generations upon generations. We served to secure a lasting peace for all that time. We united our people without the need for conflict. We guided our people through famine and disease. We led our people past our moons and into the stars beyond. I intend no different. I want what's best for all of us, as in my family, now extinguished. You've always been a vocal critic to my political agendas, John Mataz, but you have no right to sour my name as I stand above the corpses of my slain family. I am Princess Chocolate Motaz, heir of the family that is at the core of our species' identity and progress throughout the ages. Think twice before considering me in the same lot as the man who currently sits on the throne, as I would never sully the good names of your honourable sons by comparing them to the generals and admirals that sided with my father. I promise I will honour the names of Shulmas, Tornmas, and Ferromas, not only as fallen soldiers, but as the people I am sworn to care for, Chuck states, with growing firmness in her stature. She then presses ahead in challenge against Juna Masters. If it's a challenge you wish to propose, then allow me to be the first to extend it. You may remember me as a stubborn girl with naive dreams and listless aspirations, but I assure you the life I've lived in these near 4 years has been anything but merciful. I've been running, thinking myself to be the last of my family. I've encountered thousands of bounty hunters, seen what every species looks like with their innards spilled out, and faced an entire galaxy that desired me dead for one reason or another. I'm not scared of anything you have to say to me, whatever pathetic threat or doubt you cast. And yet, I am still that very same girl, with those very same naive dreams. I've been hunted by the universe in many ways, but I refuse to allow myself to be lost along with everything else. I see that as a strength I'm incredibly thankful to have. And if you wish to test that strength, I'm right here, Judd declares, before deactivating the strength enhancers in her power armor, only allowing enough power to allow basic movement. To Juna Mass's credit, there's a glimmer of temptation in her eyes, but she caves away from the challenge, looking down and away from Chuck in respect. You make yourself clear, Your Majesty, she concedes. Chuck brings her power armor back to a more protective state, and steps back to her side of the table. Your understanding is appreciated, Counselor, she says in return, before focusing her effort on everyone else. I need my Terran returned to me if you wish to see the credits agreed upon. That said, what is to be done with the children of Gaia is a discussion that may coincide with that goal. They could very well bring the end to their species as a whole. Well, the funds may prove pointless if we get caught up in Terran affairs. Princess, why should we risk our ships and crews, at any capacity, to help a very well-proven volatile Deathworlder species? Theratuma inquires clinically. Simple. They are worth saving, and it seems to me that they may be experiencing something very similar to what occurred with our own government. I have little doubt someone within their leadership has a deep connection with the children of Gaia, perhaps their leader as well. Regardless, I believe disrupting whatever they are planning here should be our first step. Though I doubt we can outright defeat them, we may be able to stall them, and then inform the rest of the Terran Union government of what is happening. That way they have every excuse to act. Allow them to deal with the situation on the grander scale. To the rest of the universe, it will appear like they are proactive against such terrorist groups, or at least give the Union a better chance to remain an entity within the galaxy. Because whether it be us or someone else, this all won't remain a hidden secret forever. In return, we may be able to leverage Terran support from our own plight. They could only benefit from improving their image by aiding. Chuck answers. So you intend to blackmail them then? Theratuma points out. No, but that consideration will certainly be useful when it comes to negotiations, Chuck replies. If it comes to it, I have no quarrel with resorting to that myself. Too much at stake to be concerned with such a paragon attitude. Brahm interjects. Chuck turns to her brother. Perhaps. But do we want to foster a more positive relation with the Terran Union, or have a terse standoff with one of the most volatile Deathworlders? Chuck counters plainly. That's assuming they won't want to turn you in for your bounty. If they wanted a strong relationship with the Kelly government, then siding with our father is the much simpler task. Even with this intel, if they sided with father and aided his plans, which could very well happen if their species is at stake, then our leverage here may prove worthless, Brahm argues. Despite not wanting to admit it, Chuck knew he could very well be right. If the rest of the Terran government is as corrupt as whoever was on that ship in the footage, assuming there is only one, then for the moment, we will keep the focus on my Terran. Find her and bring her back. Then after that, we learn all we can before we consider taking further action against the children of Gaia. The princess agrees. I will admit it's a gamble, but if we played our chips right, we may have Terran firepower behind us when we reclaim our nation, Carnotar says in thought. But first we need those funds. Jordan Mass speaks up. So send one of your stealth ships with one of my agents. They'll board that station and get us further intel on where the Terran in question may be. If we're lucky, the Terran will be on the station, and be able to be retrieved then and there, she directs. Very well, Carnotar acknowledges, already making the arrangements on his lens. Princess, my agent will need extensive details on your Terran. Allow me to record your description, Jordan Mass says, flicking at her own lens. Chuck nods and smiles softly. Her name is Simone Thatch. She was a Terran Union Marine before she moved on from that life. She is tall and physically imposing. Her musculature is exceptional, even for Terrans. She has scars all over her body. Most noticeable is the one on her jaw, and if exposed, a particularly nasty scar running up the side of her ribcage. Her fur is exciting and wild, red in colour. Her eyes are the most beautiful green, like emerald greenstones. Although they are often narrowed and intimidating, they are softer than a warm morning breeze once you look into them for long enough. And the only time I allow to see them close is when she sleeps, because then her entire face is allowed to not put up her instinctual wall of hardened demeanour. She is a lovely singer, though she only does so when she believes no one else is around. The music that comes from those lips is like watching a sunset after a long day of struggling and finding that resolution. Her laugh is coarse and loud, and she is incredibly embarrassed by it, but I enjoy listening to it nearly as much as I do her singing. She is so kind, despite hurting so much of the inside. She will always reach out to help others, to a ludicrous degree at times. Her brashness is only rivaled by her bluntness, and although at first it may come across as rude or disrespectful, she in truth is the most honest and genuine person one could ever hope to be close with. She shows her respect by not putting up an act, and by simply being herself. When her arms are around you, you feel as though nothing could ever hurt you as long as you're there. Feeling safe does not come close to that sense of absolute security. I have plenty of pictures. I'll send them to you now, Judd describes, lost in her own memories of the woman that saved her life in more ways than one. The entirety of the shuttle is silent, even Brahm, despite already being in the loop. Princess, this Terran, is she? Junamas begins to say in disbelief and concern, before Chuck interrupts. My bondmate, yes, she says promptly. She is my family, and I refuse to lose more family. Princess, this is... Jordan Mass begins to say in an argumentative and aghast manner before someone else interrupts her again. My sister has already freely conceded the throne to me, Councillor. There is no agenda to place a Terran there either, Brom notifies. There is the other matter I wish to discuss. But Your Majesty, if something were to happen to you, then this will be a problem, Junamas argues. Then I hope your agent succeeds, because if I sense any inkling that you have taken action against finding that Terran, then I will personally lead the next operation on that Terranville station. Do I make myself clear? He states, reflecting the same gravitas as his sibling from earlier. But you... Tradition demands... Junamas struggles to find ground against the only two living members of the royal family before her. I'll do everything in my power to fulfill my duties to you, Your Majesty. If the Terran lives and is recoverable, she will be. However, I must warn you, you two are the last hopes of our people returning to what we once were. I hope the princess will be so willing to lead our people into prosperity if anything happens to you, even if that means she must drop her relations with a Deathworlder to bear forth the next generation. Brom has my full support, Councillor. That should be more than satisfactory. And unless the worst does come to pass, I won't consider anyone else but him as the rightful heir. If it does, I will take his place in leading back our home. What happens after that? I'll be more than happy to come back to the table on the matter. Now, if that will be all, I'd very much like to return to my ship. Thank you for your cooperation. I look forward to working with you. Chuck dismissed. The four councillors tilt their head down in respect as Brom escorts her back to a smaller shuttle interior. We will remain in direct contact with you. In fact, you should remain with the fleet in case if anything were to happen, he suggests. Agreed, Chuck says, before glancing back to the councillors in mid-quiet discussion. Thank you for having my back. I knew as soon as I saw Jura, this discussion could turn sour. Brom sways and scratches the side of his head. You didn't need me. You really put her in her place. Even I struggle to do that at times. He brushes off. Still, it feels good to have you on my side again, Chuck replies, with a bit of her regal demeanour dissipating. Brom looks to his sister, conflicted. Chuck, I'm sorry for what I did. What I assumed. Even though I fear that I may one day regret saying so. But if by the end of this, you are who I hope you still are, I'm so sorry. Just shoot my shuttle on the way back then. Save yourself the burden of wondering. Chuck darkly jests, before hooking her lower limbs with his. I forgive you, and I swear that we'll both see this through to the end. We will bring justice to our family, and destroy everything our father is putting together. Brom sighs and wraps his uppers in a long-awaited embrace. Very well. I do my best to entrust you. No shooting shuttles required. The two hug for a short moment before Chuck steps away. Oh, good to hear. I'll await those reports, brother. She farewells, while prepping her shuttle to disconnect. Of course. Chuck returns to the Crib Chat, shuttle thankfully intact. She checks in with Choknok, informing him that they are to remain with the present fleet until more information can be acquired. She then wanders back into Simone's room and begins to remove her armour. Once she clears her upper half, the thoughts of what is to come if Brom didn't survive to see their homeworld liberated come forth, and what that may mean for her. Could she abandon her duties and people after everything is said and done? Is she being an entitled, selfish princess? Would it be a great injustice if she ended up the last of her line, and ensure herself to be the last? Although Brom is just as likely to survive as her, possibilities of how this could all end haunts her. And even if he does survive, what if she's wrong to assume that the majority of the Planetary Council won't demand for her as a female to take the throne? What if they refuse to acknowledge her stepping away from it? What if she becomes a fugitive from her own people again, with no hope of ever seeing the moons in the sky of Sin Mortaz? Could she do it? Run from her people again? Live this life of constantly running while everyone she cares about is at risk protecting her? She doesn't want to be protected. She just wants to live her life the way she desires. I am selfish, she softly chirps, covering her head with all four of her limbs. Chuck lowers herself to the floor and rests on her knees. I don't know what to do, she says to an empty room. What do I do? There's no answer, other than the low hum of the ship's engine. She listens to it, finding a small comfort from the sound that guided her into slumber so very often. A bit of reprieving focus comes back to her, but it soon falls to the other more pressing matter. Simone. She wants the Terran to be there, to say something that makes her feel better, to hold her and make all these worries melt away. Her mind drifts to all the times Simone made her feel safe, all the times she had her strong Terran arms around her. Then she recalls Vapor Perna, while she cried on the balcony. A poisoned Simone caught her in distress, and the Terran says something that made this Callie's heart sing out in a burst of relief. You're allowed to be a little selfish, Jack. Chuck wakes up on the floor, uncertain when or for how long sleep has claimed her. It takes her a dazed moment to notice that what woke her is Brom attempting to call her via lens. Without hesitation, she accepts the incoming request, and before she can get a single word in, he relays his urgent message. We know where she is, but she doesn't have long.